you're late. The owner arrives any moment, and this place looks like a disaster." The words sliced through the pristine cabin of the Gulfstream G700, like a blade through silk. Victoria Sterling's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who believed her authority was absolute, her judgment unquestionable. She stood there in her immaculate flight attendant uniform, blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon red lipstick, precise as a weapon, pointing a manicured finger at the woman in the oversized Princeton hoodie who was quietly cleaning a coffee spill from the carpet. What Victoria didn't know was that in exactly 18 minutes, that woman would reveal herself as Dr. Amara Williams, owner of Apex Private Aviation and Victoria's World, would collapse faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. But before we dive into this incredible story of assumption, humiliation, and ultimate justice, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? Have you ever walked into a room and felt eyes sizing you up, making decisions about who you are before you even speak? Drop your city in the comments below and tell me about a time when someone underestimated you. And while you're here, smash that subscribe button because stories like this one deserve to be heard, shared, and remembered. Now I need to warn you. This story will make your blood boil at first. You'll want to reach through the screen and shake some sense into certain people. But stick with me because what happens next is the most satisfying example of karma I've ever witnessed. We're talking about a reversal so complete, so perfectly orchestrated that it's been viewed over 50 million times across social media platforms. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let me tell you about the day a flight attendant learned the most expensive lesson of her career. This is the story of how 18 minutes of prejudice and cruelty led to a transformation that changed not just one company, but an entire industry's approach to dignity and respect. The morning air at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey carried the scent of jet fuel and possibility. It was one of those crisp October days when the sky looked like polished silver and the leaves were just beginning to hint at autumn's arrival. Inside Hangar 7, the crown jewel of Apex Private Aviation's fleet sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The Gulfstream G700 was more than an aircraft. It was a statement. At $96 million, it represented the pinnacle of luxury aviation. Its pearl-white exterior was flawless, its interior appointed with hand-stitched Italian leather, Brazilian rosewood, and technology that most people could only dream of. Every surface had been chosen with meticulous care, every detail crafted to perfection. But perfection, as the morning would prove, is only skin deep. Dr. Amara Williams emerged from the black Mercedes S-Class that had brought her from Manhattan, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing. At 32, she was younger than most people expected when they heard the name behind Apex Aviation. She was also currently wearing clothes that would make Victoria Sterling's judgment seem not just wrong, but catastrophically misguided. Amara's Princeton hoodie was oversized and soft with wear, the kind of comfort clothing that successful people allow themselves when they think no one important is watching. Her yoga pants were high-end, but looked like standard athletic wear, and her sneakers, while they were actually limited edition Louboutins worth more than most people's monthly salary, appeared to be simple white trainers to the untrained eye. Her natural hair was pulled back in what she called her thinking bun, messy, practical, and completely at odds with the boardroom image most people had of a CEO. She looked, in other words, exactly like someone who belonged in the service industry rather than the executive suite. And that was precisely why today would become a masterclass in the danger of assumptions. Amara was exhausted. She'd spent the last 72 hours in Tokyo negotiating a merger that would expand Apex's reach into the Asian market. The meetings had been brutal, the time difference unforgiving, and the pressure immense. All she wanted was to sit in seat 1A of her own aircraft, close her eyes for 20 minutes, and maybe grab a sparkling water before the other passengers arrived for their flight to London. What she got instead was an education in how her own employees treated people they perceived as beneath them. Victoria Sterling had been preparing for this flight for 3 hours. She'd arrived at Teterboro before dawn, her alarm set for 4:30 a.m. because today wasn't just any flight. According to the manifest, they were carrying Dr. Amara Williams, the founder and CEO of Apex Private Aviation, along with several high-profile passengers to London for a business conference. Victoria had been with Apex for 5 years, climbing steadily through the ranks of the Flight Services Division. She'd started as a junior attendant on smaller aircraft and worked her way up to lead attendant on the flagship routes. But what she really wanted, what consumed her thoughts during her off hours and drove her to perfect every detail of her appearance and performance, was the chief cabin officer position that would be opening next week. The CCO role would mean a corner office at corporate headquarters, a 6-figure salary, and most importantly, the kind of respect and recognition that Victoria felt she deserved. She'd been passed over once before 2 years ago, and she was determined not to let it happen again. Everything about today had to be perfect. Victoria was the kind of person who believed that success was about image, that respect was earned through appearances, and that the world was divided into 2 kinds of people, those who mattered and those who served them. She'd grown up in Connecticut, the daughter of a pharmaceutical executive and a former model, and she'd learned early that beauty and breeding opened doors that merit alone could not. At 5'8", with the kind of bone structure that looked good in photographs and the kind of confidence that commanded attention, Victoria was used to being the most impressive person in any room. Her uniform was tailored to perfection, her makeup applied with professional precision, and her smile could charm billionaires or freeze out anyone she deemed unworthy of her time. She was in every sense the opposite of the woman who would soon walk onto her aircraft and change her life forever. Miguel Santos was polishing the already spotless galley counter when Victoria swept through the cabin like a hurricane in heels. At 24, Miguel was the youngest member of the crew, but he was also the most observant. He'd been working for Apex for just over a year, and he'd learned to read the subtle signs that indicated whether a flight would go smoothly or become a nightmare. Today, all signs pointed to nightmare. Miguel Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. "The water glasses have spots. I can see them from here. Do you want Dr. Williams to think we're running some kind of discount operation?" Miguel examined the glasses, which looked perfect to his eyes, but he knew better than to argue. Victoria had been increasingly demanding over the past few months, her stress about the upcoming promotion making her impossible to please and dangerous to cross. "Sorry, Victoria. I'll redo them right now. And check the bathroom again. Make sure the towels are folded exactly like the training manual shows. Hot towel warmer at exactly 98 degrees. Hand soap dispensed to the precise line on the bottle. Dr. Williams notices everything, and I will not have my promotion chances ruined because you couldn't follow basic procedures." Miguel nodded and headed toward the lavatory, but he paused when he noticed Victoria's hands shaking slightly as she rearranged the fresh orchids in the main cabin. She was more nervous than he'd ever seen her, and that made him nervous too. When Victoria was on edge, everyone suffered. The other passengers weren't due to arrive for another 40 minutes, which should have given the crew plenty of time to complete their preparations. But Victoria's perfectionism had reached obsessive levels. She'd already made Miguel repolish the fixtures twice, reorganize the magazine selection 3 times, and adjust the cabin lighting for optimal ambiance more times than he could count. Remember, Victoria said, checking her reflection in the bathroom mirror one final time, "Dr. Williams is the most important passenger we've ever carried. She built this company from nothing, and if we impress her today, it could change everything for us. But if we mess this up..." She didn't need to finish the threat. Miguel understood. In Victoria's world, there was no middle ground between perfection and failure, no room for human error or genuine mistakes. There was only success or termination. What neither of them realized was that Dr. Williams was already walking across the tarmac toward their aircraft, moving with the casual stride of someone who owned the ground beneath her feet. She'd decided to board early, hoping for a few minutes of quiet before the chaos of a transatlantic flight with demanding passengers. She had no idea that her decision would expose a culture of prejudice and cruelty that had been hiding beneath the polished surface of her own company. The main cabin door opened with its characteristic hydraulic whisper at exactly 8:47 a.m. Dr. Amara Williams stepped aboard her Gulfstream G700 and immediately noticed something that would set the entire morning in motion: a small coffee stain on the cream-colored carpet near the galley entrance. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a quarter, and it clearly wasn't fresh. Probably from yesterday's flight missed during the overnight cleaning. Most passengers would have ignored it, or at worst mentioned it to the flight crew. But Amara wasn't most passengers. She was an owner who cared about details, and more importantly, she was someone who had been raised to clean up messes rather than leave them for others. Without thinking, she set her vintage Hermes travel bag on seat 1A and walked to the galley area. She grabbed a cloth napkin from the service counter and knelt down to dab at the stain. It came up easily, just a surface mark that needed a gentle touch. That was when Victoria Sterling emerged from the aft cabin like an avenging angel in a pencil skirt. Victoria had been in the back galley obsessively arranging the welcome champagne service when she heard the cabin door open. She glanced at her watch. The passengers weren't scheduled to board for another 35 minutes. Her first thought was that it must be a ground crew member, or perhaps someone from catering with a last-minute delivery. But when she stepped into the main cabin and saw a black woman in street clothes kneeling on her immaculate carpet holding a napkin, Victoria's brain made a series of rapid calculations that would prove to be spectacularly wrong. Casual clothes check, cleaning the floor check. Early arrival, obviously late from scheduled service. Black woman definitely not on the passenger manifest. "You're late." Victoria's voice cut through the cabin silence like a fire alarm. "The owner arrives any moment, and this place looks like a disaster." Amara looked up from the carpet, startled. She'd been so focused on the stain that she hadn't heard anyone approaching. She found herself looking up at a tall, immaculately dressed blonde woman whose facial expression suggested she'd just discovered a roach in her salad. "I'm sorry," Amara said, rising to her feet slowly. "Don't. I'm sorry." "Me." Victoria snapped her tone, dripping with the kind of authority that comes from years of ordering people around. "I specifically requested that all cleaning be completed by 8:30. It's almost 9 o'clock. Do you have any idea who's flying on this aircraft today?" Amara blinked, processing the situation. This was her plane, her employee, and her company. But she was being spoken to like she was an errant child caught breaking the rules. The irony was so thick she could almost taste it. "I think there might be some confusion," Amara said carefully, her voice calm and measured. "The only confusion Victoria interrupted is why your supervisor sent someone who clearly doesn't understand the importance of punctuality. We have Dr. Amara Williams flying with us today. She owns this entire company. Do you understand what that means?" Victoria stepped closer, and Amara caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with the sharp scent of hairspray and barely contained panic. "It means," Victoria continued, "that everything has to be absolutely perfect. Every surface spotless, every detail flawless, every member of the service team invisible and efficient. What it does not mean is having cleaning staff wandering around the cabin 20 minutes before our VIP passengers arrive." Amara found herself in a fascinating position. She could end this charade with a simple statement: "I am Dr. Williams." But something about Victoria's tone, about the casual cruelty in her assumption, made her pause. How did Victoria treat people she perceived as powerless? How did her company's culture really function when the owner wasn't watching? "You're right," Amara said finally. "Dr. Williams does expect everything to be perfect." Victoria's expression softened slightly, apparently relieved that the cleaning woman was finally showing appropriate deference. "Good. Now I need you to finish that carpet, properly this time, and then take care of the galley. The counters need to be wiped down, the trash needs to be emptied, and the floor needs a proper mopping. Can you handle that?" She reached into a cabinet beneath the bar and pulled out a spray bottle of industrial cleaner and a roll of paper towels, thrusting them into Amara's hands with the casual dismissiveness of someone handing out parking tickets. Miguel Santos emerged from the aft lavatory at that moment carrying a small trash bag. He took one look at the scene. Victoria, standing imperiously over a woman in casual clothes who was holding cleaning supplies, and felt his stomach drop. Something was wrong with this picture, but Miguel couldn't put his finger on what. The woman looked calm, almost amused, which wasn't the typical reaction of someone being dressed down by Victoria Sterling, and there were details that didn't quite fit the quality of her sneakers. The expensive-looking handbag on seat 1A, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence rather than service industry deference. Victoria Miguel said carefully, You should mind your own business." Victoria cut him off without looking away from Amara. "And make sure the bathroom is actually clean this time. I found water spots on the mirror." Miguel hesitated for a moment, then retreated toward the galley. But he kept watching his instincts telling him that this situation was about to explode in ways that Victoria couldn't imagine. Amara looked down at the cleaning supplies in her hands. She'd built a multi-billion-dollar company, employed over 3,000 people, and revolutionized the private aviation industry. And now she was being handed a spray bottle by her own employee who was treating her like she was barely worth the effort of conversation. "Is there anything else you need me to clean?" Amara asked, her tone perfectly neutral. Victoria smiled for the first time that morning, apparently pleased that she'd established the proper hierarchy. "Just stick to the main cabin for now. And try to be efficient about it. You'll need to be out of here before the passengers start boarding. Dr. Williams has very high standards, and I won't have her first impression of my service ruined by seeing cleaning staff still working." Amara nodded slowly. "I'll make sure Dr. Williams gets exactly the kind of service she deserves." Victoria's smile widened. Perfect. And remember, invisible and efficient. Those are the qualities that separate professional service staff from amateurs. As Victoria clicked away toward the cockpit to brief Captain Hayes, Amara stood alone in the main cabin of her own aircraft holding cleaning supplies and marveling at what she'd just learned about her company culture. The test had begun, and Victoria Sterling was failing it spectacularly. 20 minutes had passed since Victoria had handed Amara the cleaning supplies, and what started as a simple case of mistaken identity was rapidly evolving into something much more sinister. Victoria had returned from her briefing with Captain Hayes with renewed energy and an even sharper edge to her authority. "I thought I made myself clear about being efficient," Victoria said, appearing beside Amara like a shark sensing blood in the water. "You're still here, and you've barely made any progress." Amara had in fact been methodically cleaning the already spotless cabin. She'd wiped down surfaces that didn't need wiping, polished fixtures that were already gleaming, and even reorganized the magazine display according to some imaginary standard of perfection. But she'd been doing it slowly, carefully, giving Victoria plenty of opportunities to reveal exactly who she was when she thought no one important was watching. "I want to make sure everything meets Dr. Williams's standards," Amara replied, spraying the glass partition that separated the main cabin from the galley. "Dr. Williams's standards." Victoria laughed, a sharp sound that carried no warmth. "Honey, Dr. Williams doesn't care about the opinions of cleaning staff. She cares about results. And right now the only result I see is a woman who's taking 3 times longer than necessary to do a job that should have been finished before you even arrived." Victoria stepped closer, and Amara could see the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't just about cleaning schedules or service standards. This was about power, about establishing dominance, about putting someone Victoria perceived as beneath her in their proper place. "Let me explain something to you," Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a tone that was somehow more threatening than shouting. "I've been with this company for 5 years. I've flown with celebrities, politicians, billionaires. People who could buy and sell your entire family without thinking twice about it. I know what excellence looks like and what I'm seeing right now, isn't it? Miguel appeared in the galley entrance ostensibly to check the ice supply, but actually because he'd been watching this interaction with growing unease. The woman Victoria was berating hadn't shown a single sign of the servile behavior that Victoria seemed to expect. Instead, she maintained a calm dignity that reminded Miguel of someone, though he couldn't quite place who. "Maybe I should finish the cleaning," Miguel offered quietly. "I've got time before the passengers." "You absolutely will not," Victoria snapped, whirling to face him. "This woman was hired to do a job, and she's going to do it properly. I won't have Dr. Williams thinking that Apex employees step in to cover for incompetent contractors." She turned back to Amara, her eyes scanning the cabin for something to criticize. "And another thing. Where's your uniform professional cleaning services provide proper attire for their employees? That hoodie is completely inappropriate for a luxury aircraft environment." Amara looked down at her Princeton sweatshirt, remembering the day she'd bought it during her sophomore year. She'd been one of only 30 black students in her engineering program, and she'd worn that hoodie like armor against the assumptions and microaggressions that came with being different in a space that wasn't designed for her. Now, 15 years later, she was wearing it again as armor against assumptions of a different kind. "I'll make sure to dress more appropriately next time," Amara said. Next time, Victoria's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, sweetheart, there won't be a next time. I'm going to have a very serious conversation with your supervisor about punctuality, efficiency, and professional standards. People like you are exactly why high-end service companies have such trouble maintaining their reputation." The phrase hung in the air like poison gas. "People like you." Miguel felt his chest tighten. He'd heard that phrase before, and it never meant anything good. It was the kind of language that revealed what someone really thought when they believed they could speak without consequences. Amara's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. The test was becoming something else now. This wasn't just about service standards or company culture. This was about respect, dignity, and the casual cruelty that people inflicted when they thought they held all the power. "People like me," Amara asked quietly. Victoria seemed to realize she'd stepped onto dangerous ground, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. "People who don't understand that luxury service is about anticipating needs, exceeding expectations, and maintaining standards that justify the premium our clients pay. Dr. Williams didn't build this company by accepting mediocrity, and I didn't earn my position by making excuses for substandard performance." She gestured around the cabin with proprietary pride. "Every surface in this aircraft represents excellence. Every detail reflects our commitment to perfection. When someone like Dr. Williams steps onto this plane, she should see her vision reflected in everything around her. What she should not see is a cleaning person in street clothes moving through her space like she belongs here." The irony was so profound that Amara almost smiled. Here was Victoria standing in Amara's aircraft, explaining Amara's vision to Amara while treating Amara like she was barely human. "I understand," Amara said. "Dr. Williams expects people to know their place." "Exactly." Victoria beamed, apparently thrilled that the message was finally getting through. "Everyone has a role to play in maintaining the Apex experience. Your role is to clean efficiently and invisibly. My role is to ensure that our VIP passengers receive service that exceeds their already high expectations." She checked her diamond-encrusted watch, a graduation gift from her parents that cost more than Miguel made in 6 months. "Speaking of which, you need to move faster. The other passengers will be boarding in 20 minutes, and I need you out of here before then." Dr. Williams specifically requested that the cabin appear pristine and ready with no signs of ongoing maintenance or service work. Victoria walked to the galley and returned with a large black trash bag. "Here," she said, thrusting it into Amara's hands. "Collect all the waste from the cabin bins, then take it out to the ground crew dumpster. The galley needs to be spotless. No fingerprints on the fixtures, no water spots on the glasses, no crumbs in the drawers. Can you handle that level of detail, or should I call your company and request someone more experienced?" Amara looked at the trash bag, then at Victoria's expectant face. "I think I can manage," she said. "Good. And remember, fast and invisible. I don't want to see you, hear you, or think about you once the passengers start arriving. Is that clear? Crystal clear?" As Victoria strutted away to inspect Miguel's work in the bathroom, Amara stood alone in the main cabin holding a trash bag and marveling at what she'd just witnessed. Her own employee had just explained her company's values to her while treating her with a level of disrespect that revealed exactly how hollow those values were when applied to people Victoria deemed unworthy. But the morning was far from over, and Victoria Sterling was about to learn that assumptions like aircraft can crash with devastating consequences. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been running late for her 9:30 a.m. departure to London, but as she hurried across the tarmac toward the gleaming Gulfstream G700, her professional instincts as a travel blogger kicked in. Something was happening aboard the aircraft that looked worth documenting. Through the large cabin windows, Elena could see what appeared to be a confrontation between the flight attendant and another woman. As a content creator who specialized in luxury travel experiences, Elena had witnessed her share of behind-the-scenes drama. But this looked different. The body language, the power dynamics, the clear tension. It was the kind of authentic moment that her 800,000 Instagram followers lived for. Elena quickly activated her phone's camera and began recording as she approached the aircraft stairs. Inside the cabin, Victoria had returned from her inspection of Miguel's work with a growing sense of satisfaction. The young man was properly intimidated. The cleaning woman was finally showing appropriate deference, and the cabin was approaching the level of perfection that would surely impress Dr. Williams and secure Victoria's promotion. But when she entered the main cabin and saw Amara sitting in seat 1, checking something on her phone with her feet up on the ottoman, Victoria's carefully constructed composure shattered like crystal hitting concrete. "What do you think you're doing?" Victoria's voice rose to a pitch that could have shattered the champagne glasses. Amara looked up calmly, taking a short break. "I was feeling a bit tired." "A break?" Victoria's face flushed red, clashing horribly with her carefully applied coral lipstick. "You think you can just sit wherever you want? That's a $10,000 seat reserved for paying passengers." "It's very comfortable," Amara observed, settling back into the butter-soft leather. "Dr. Williams has excellent taste in aircraft furnishings." Victoria marched over and loomed above Amara, her hands planted on her hips in a posture of absolute authority. "Get up now. I don't care if your feet hurt. I don't care if you're tired, and I certainly don't care about your opinion of Dr. Williams's taste. You are service staff, and service staff does not sit in passenger seating. Ever." Through the cabin window, Elena Rodriguez had a perfect view of the confrontation. She held her phone steady, capturing every gesture, every expression, every word. This was either going to be a masterclass in professional service or a complete disaster. And either way, her followers needed to see it. Amara made no move to get up. Instead, she looked directly into Victoria's eyes with the kind of calm assessment that successful executives used when evaluating whether someone was worth their time. "You seem very stressed about Dr. Williams's arrival," Amara said. "Tell me, what exactly are you worried about?" The question caught Victoria off guard. She'd been expecting immediate compliance, groveling apologies, perhaps even tears. She had not been expecting a calm, analytical question delivered in the tone of someone conducting an interview. "I'm worried," Victoria said through gritted teeth, "about maintaining the standards that have made Apex Private Aviation the premier luxury charter service in North America. Standards that you are currently destroying by sitting in a seat that costs more per hour than you probably make in a month." "Interesting perspective," Amara replied. "And you think Dr. Williams would be upset to see someone sitting here?" I think Dr. Williams would be furious to see cleaning staff treating her aircraft like their personal lounge. Now get up, before I call security." That was when Miguel Santos realized who he was looking at. It had been bothering him all morning, the sense that he recognized the woman Victoria was harassing. Something about her posture, her voice, her way of remaining calm under pressure. And when she'd asked that question about Dr. Williams using the exact tone Miguel had heard in corporate training videos, the pieces finally clicked into place. He'd seen this woman before. Not in person, but in photographs on the company website, in Forbes magazine articles, in the framed portrait that hung in the Apex Aviation lobby. The facial structure was the same, the intelligent eyes, the quiet confidence that came from having built something extraordinary from nothing. Victoria Miguel said urgently, stepping into the main cabin, I think you should focus on your own responsibilities," Victoria snapped without looking at him. "Unless you want to be reported to HR for failing to maintain professional boundaries." Miguel felt his heart hammering against his ribs. If he was right, if this woman was actually Dr. Amara Williams, then Victoria was about to commit career suicide in front of witnesses. But if he was wrong, if he interfered with Victoria's authority based on a mistaken impression, his own job would be forfeit. Jessica Monroe chose that moment to board the aircraft, sweeping up the stairs in a cloud of Chanel number 5 and entitlement. Jessica was exactly the kind of passenger Victoria lived to serve, wealthy, demanding, and completely convinced that the world existed for her convenience. She was also the kind of person who noticed expensive details and had strong opinions about who belonged where. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Jessica announced, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. Victoria spun around, her expression instantly transforming from fury to obsequious delight. "Mrs. Monroe, welcome aboard. Not interrupting at all, just dealing with a small service issue that will be resolved momentarily." Jessica's sharp eyes took in the scene, Victoria standing over a seated black woman in casual clothes, Miguel hovering nervously in the background, and Elena Rodriguez visible through the window with her phone raised. Service issue. Jessica's tone suggested that she found the situation more entertaining than problematic. "Nothing for you to worry about," Victoria assured her, "just explaining to the cleaning staff that passenger seating is off limits during service hours." Jessica moved closer, her gaze flicking over Amara's appearance with the practiced assessment of someone who had spent decades evaluating people based on their clothing and accessories. "Those are interesting sneakers," Jessica observed. "Limited edition Louboutin, if I'm not mistaken. Rather expensive for cleaning staff." Victoria glanced down at Amara's feet, noticing for the first time that what she'd assumed were generic white trainers were actually designer footwear that cost more than Victoria's monthly rent. "I'm sure they're knockoffs," Victoria said quickly, but doubt had crept into her voice. "No," Jessica said thoughtfully, crouching slightly to get a better look. "Those are definitely authentic. I have the same pair in black, and that handbag on the seat. That's vintage Hermes. Kelly bag probably from the 1970s. You're looking at about $15,000 just in accessories." The cabin fell silent except for the gentle hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish struggling for air as the implications of Jessica's observations sank in. Elena Rodriguez, still filming from outside, watched as the dynamics inside the cabin shifted like tectonic plates. Whatever was happening here, it was about to reach a breaking point. Perhaps Jessica continued settling into seat 2A. With obvious relish, we should wait for Dr. Williams to arrive before making any more assumptions about who belongs where. Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, but pride and panic drove her forward into what would prove to be the final fatal phase of her career at Apex Private Aviation. "I don't care if she's wearing diamond shoes," Victoria declared, her voice rising to near hysteria. "She is not a passenger. She is not supposed to be here, and she needs to get out of that seat immediately before Dr. Williams arrives." She reached for Amara's arm, intending to physically remove her from the seat. That was the moment when everything changed. The instant Victoria's hand made contact with Amara's arm, the cabin atmosphere shifted from tense to explosive. It wasn't just the presumption of physical force, though that was shocking enough. It was the casual entitlement that suggested Victoria believed she had the right to put her hands on someone she perceived as powerless. Amara looked down at Victoria's grip on her forearm, then up at Victoria's face with an expression that could have frozen helium. "Remove your hand," Amara said quietly. The tone was so calm, so controlled, and so absolutely authoritative that Victoria actually loosened her grip before catching herself. "I'll remove my hand when you remove yourself from that seat," Victoria shot back. But her voice lacked the confidence it had carried just moments before. Elena Rodriguez had moved closer to the aircraft windows, her phone capturing every second of the confrontation. She'd started a live stream on Instagram, and her viewer count was climbing rapidly as followers shared the stream with captions like, "Watch this flight," "Attendant lose her mind," and "Luxury travel." Drama unfolding live. Inside the cabin, Miguel Santos had finally made a decision that would define his career at Apex Aviation. "Victoria," he said firmly, stepping forward, "you need to stop. Right now." "Excuse me." Victoria whirled to face him, her hand still on Amara's arm. "Let go of her and step back. This has gone way too far. How dare you tell me what to do?" Victoria's voice had reached a pitch that was affecting the crystal stemware. "I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft, and I will not be undermined by some junior employee who doesn't understand the first thing about maintaining professional standards." "Professional standards?" Miguel's voice carried a note of incredulous anger. "You just put your hands on a passenger. She is not a passenger," Victoria screamed. Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the cockpit at that moment, drawn by the sound of Victoria's voice carrying through the aircraft. At 52, Captain Hayes had been flying for Apex since its early days when the company operated just 3 aircraft, and Amara Williams was still proving to the world that a young black woman could revolutionize an industry. He'd flown Dr. Williams dozens of times over the years, and he recognized her the moment he stepped into the main cabin. Dr. Williams. Captain Hayes said, his voice carrying the warm respect of a longtime colleague. "I wasn't expecting you to board so early. Good morning." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She released Amara's arm and stumbled backward, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, horror, and dawning comprehension. "Captain Hayes." Amara replied, standing gracefully and extending her hand. "Good morning. I hope you don't mind that I came aboard early. I was hoping for a few minutes of quiet before the other passengers arrived." "Of course not," Captain Hayes said, shaking her hand warmly. "The aircraft is always at your disposal. I've completed the pre-flight checklist and we should be ready for departure as soon as everyone's aboard." He turned to Victoria, who was standing frozen in the center of the cabin like a statue of horror. "Victoria, I see you've met Dr. Williams, our company founder and CEO." The silence that followed was so complete that Elena Rodriguez, still filming from outside, could hear the tick of someone's expensive watch through the aircraft walls. Victoria's mouth moved soundlessly, her brain apparently unable to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. She had spent the last 30 minutes ordering the owner of Apex Private Aviation to clean the cabin, treating her like servant staff, physically grabbing her and lecturing her about company standards. Jessica Monroe, who had been watching the drama unfold with the delighted attention of someone at a particularly good theater performance, began to laugh. It wasn't cruel laughter. It was the kind of amazed delight that comes from witnessing something so perfectly ironic that it seems scripted. "Oh my," Jessica said, pulling out her own phone to capture the moment. "This is the best entertainment I've had in years." Miguel Santos felt a wave of relief so intense he nearly collapsed. His instincts had been right, and more importantly, he'd chosen to stand up rather than remain silent when it mattered most. Elena Rodriguez's live stream had exploded across social media. The viewer count had reached 6 figures, and comments were flooding in faster than she could read them. Plot twist of the century. That flight attendant is about to lose everything. CEO in a hoodie equals ultimate boss move. I am living for this karma. Victoria finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. Dr. Williams, I didn't. I thought. You thought what exactly? Amara asked, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built a billion-dollar company. What made you assume that I was cleaning staff? Was it my clothing, my appearance, my race? What specific factor led you to conclude that I couldn't possibly be a passenger on my own aircraft? Victoria's training kicked in. The corporates speak the polished responses that were supposed to deflect and minimize difficult situations. There was a communication breakdown, Victoria said desperately. A scheduling misunderstanding. I was told that cleaning services would be completed before passenger boarding, and when I saw someone in casual attire... Stop, Amara said firmly. Don't insult my intelligence with corporate doublespeak. You made an assumption based on what you saw, and then you spent 30 minutes treating me with a level of disrespect that reveals exactly what you think of people you perceive as beneath you. She gestured toward the cleaning supplies that were still sitting on the galley counter. You handed me a spray bottle and told me to clean. You ordered me to take out trash. You told me that people like me don't belong in first class. You physically grabbed me when I didn't comply with your demands. None of that was a communication breakdown, Victoria. That was a character revelation. Captain Hayes was shaking his head in disgust. In all his years of flying, he'd never witnessed such a complete failure of professionalism and basic human decency. Dr. Williams, he said formally, I apologize on behalf of Apex Aviation for this inexcusable behavior. Victoria's conduct does not represent our company values or training standards. Doesn't it? Amara asked pointedly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like an exact representation of how this company treats people when management isn't watching. She walked to seat 1A and picked up her phone. Miguel, she said, her voice carrying across the cabin. Thank you for speaking up when it mattered. That took courage, and it's exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. Miguel felt tears prick his eyes. In a world where standing up often meant standing alone, Dr. Williams had seen and acknowledged his choice to do the right thing. Victoria Amara continued her attention, returning to the woman who was now visibly trembling. You're terminated, effective immediately. Captain Hayes will escort you from the aircraft. Please, Victoria whispered. I need this job. The promotion, I've worked so hard. You worked hard at maintaining an image, Amara replied. But character isn't about how you behave when important people are watching. It's about how you treat people when you think no one will ever know. She gestured toward Elena's phone, which was still visible through the window. Unfortunately for you, someone was always watching, and now the whole world knows exactly who Victoria Sterling really is when she thinks she has power over someone else. Elena Rodriguez's live stream had reached viral status. The hashtags #ApexAviation, #Victoria Sterling, and #CEO in disguise were trending across multiple platforms, and news outlets were already picking up the story. Victoria Sterling's 30 minutes of perceived power had cost her everything, and the reckoning was just beginning. The aftermath of Captain Hayes's greeting hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Victoria Sterling stood frozen in the center of the main cabin, her perfect composure finally shattered while the weight of her catastrophic mistake settled around her like a collapsing building. Dr. Williams Captain Hayes continued apparently oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. I've filed our flight plan for London Heathrow. Weather looks excellent, and we should have you there right on schedule for your conference. Amara nodded, maintaining her characteristic calm despite having just experienced 30 minutes of discrimination from her own employee. "Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your professionalism as always." The contrast between Captain Hayes's respectful familiarity and Victoria's treatment couldn't have been more stark. Here was a man who had worked with Amara for years, who understood that respect wasn't determined by clothing or circumstances, but by character and achievement. Jessica Monroe, who had been documenting the scene with the rapt attention of someone witnessing history, leaned forward in her seat. "Dr. Williams," Jessica said, her voice carrying newfound respect. "I have to ask, how long were you planning to let this continue?" It was an excellent question, and one that Victoria was desperately hoping would reveal some larger plan, some explanation that might minimize the scope of her professional suicide. Amara considered the question thoughtfully. "I wasn't planning anything specific. I came aboard early hoping for a few quiet minutes before departure. When Victoria assumed I was cleaning staff, I decided to see what that experience would reveal about our company culture." She looked directly at Victoria, who was still struggling to process the magnitude of what had occurred. "I learned that when one of my senior employees believes she has power over someone she perceives as powerless, she becomes cruel. She orders them around like property. She makes assumptions based on appearance and race. She threatens them with security when they don't show proper deference. And ultimately she puts her hands on them when they fail to comply with her demands." Captain Hayes's expression darkened as he absorbed the implications of what Dr. Williams was describing. "Victoria, is this true? Did you physically touch Dr. Williams?" Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could she explain that she'd grabbed the arm of the woman who owned the aircraft, the company, and her career? How could she justify behavior that would have been inappropriate even if Amara had been actual cleaning staff? Miguel Santos stepped forward, finding courage in Dr. Williams's presence. "Captain Hayes, I witnessed the entire interaction." Victoria treated Dr. Williams with complete disrespect from the moment she boarded. She handed her cleaning supplies, ordered her to take out trash, told her that people like her don't belong in first class, and yes, she grabbed her arm when Dr. Williams didn't immediately comply with her demand to leave the passenger seating. The weight of Miguel's testimony hit Victoria like a physical blow. There would be no escape, no alternative narrative, no corporate damage control. Everything had been witnessed, recorded, and documented in real time. "Mother of God," Captain Hayes whispered, running his hand through his silver hair. "Victoria, how could you? What were you thinking, I thought?" Victoria's voice emerged as a broken whisper. "I thought she was cleaning staff. I thought I was maintaining standards. I thought—" "You thought what exactly?" Amara asked, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her one of the most respected executives in the aviation industry. "That cleaning staff deserves to be treated like servants, that people who work with their hands are somehow beneath basic courtesy and respect." The question exposed the ugly truth that Victoria had been trying to avoid acknowledging even to herself. Her treatment of Amara hadn't been about maintaining standards or professional protocols. It had been about exercising power over someone she believed couldn't fight back. Elena Rodriguez, who had been documenting everything from outside the aircraft, had moved to where she could capture audio through the open cabin door. Her live stream viewer count had exceeded 500,000, and major news outlets were beginning to pick up the story. The comments section had become a real-time reaction feed. "This is the most incredible karma I've ever witnessed. Live. CEO catches. Employee being racist in real time. That flight attendant's career is over." Dr. Williams handled this with such class and dignity. As the reality of the situation settled over the cabin, Victoria made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her career. "Dr. Williams," she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. It was never my intention to treat you with anything other than the utmost respect. If I could just explain the circumstances." "Please," Amara replied calmly. "Explain the circumstances that led you to grab my arm." Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. There were no circumstances that could justify that action. No explanation that would make physical contact appropriate. No context that would excuse putting her hands on someone who had done nothing more threatening than sit in a chair. I was stressed about your visit," Victoria finally managed. "I wanted everything to be perfect for you, and when I saw someone in casual clothes in the passenger cabin, I panicked." "You panicked," Amara repeated flatly, "and your panic response was to order that person to clean your aircraft, take out trash, and leave the cabin before the real passengers arrived." Jessica Monroe laughed outright. "Oh, honey, no. That wasn't panic. That was prejudice, plain and simple." Captain Hayes was shaking his head in disgust. "Victoria, in 30 years of flying, I have never seen such a complete failure of professionalism, judgment, and basic human decency. You've embarrassed yourself, this company, and everyone who's ever worn an Apex Aviation uniform." Miguel felt compelled to add his own observation. "Dr. Williams, I want you to know that I tried to intervene. I could tell something was wrong from the beginning, but Victoria threatened my job when I tried to speak up." "Thank you, Miguel," Amara said warmly. "Standing up to authority when you see something wrong takes real courage. That's exactly the kind of character this company should be promoting." The contrast was devastating. Miguel, the most junior member of the crew, had shown more integrity and professional judgment than Victoria, the senior flight attendant, who was supposed to be leading by example. Elena Rodriguez had transitioned from filming through the windows to actually boarding the aircraft, her press credentials giving her access to document what was rapidly becoming one of the most widely shared workplace discrimination incidents in social media history. Dr. Williams Elena said, introducing herself, "I'm Elena Rodriguez from Luxury Travel Insider. Would you be willing to comment on what just happened here?" Amara considered the question. She hadn't planned on turning her morning travel into a public statement, but Victoria's behavior had created a teachable moment that extended far beyond one employee's poor judgment. "What happened here," Amara said, "is a perfect example of how people reveal their true character when they think they have power over someone else. Victoria didn't mistreat me because she thought I was cleaning staff. She mistreated me because she thought cleaning staff deserved to be mistreated." She gestured around the cabin of her aircraft. "I built this company based on the principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their role, their appearance, or their background. What Victoria showed me today is that those principles weren't being consistently applied when management wasn't watching." The cabin door opened again, and Dr. Marcus Thompson, one of the other passengers scheduled for the London flight, stepped aboard. Dr. Thompson was a renowned cardiac surgeon who had flown with Apex dozens of times, and he immediately recognized the unusual tension in the aircraft. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Thompson said carefully. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Actually," Jessica Monroe said with obvious delight, "you're just in time for the most educational moment in customer service history." Dr. Thompson noticed Elena Rodriguez with her camera, Miguel Santos looking simultaneously relieved and vindicated, Captain Hayes shaking his head in disgust, and Victoria Sterling standing in the center of the cabin looking like she'd just witnessed her own funeral. "Dr. Williams," Dr. Thompson said, nodding respectfully to Amara. "Good to see you again. I trust everything is well." "Everything is very enlightening," Amara replied. "We've just had an excellent demonstration of how assumptions can destroy careers." Victoria realized that Dr. Thompson's easy familiarity with Dr. Williams was the final nail in the coffin of any hope that this might somehow be explained away as a misunderstanding. There was no ambiguity about Amara's identity. No possibility of claiming confusion about passenger manifests or boarding procedures. She had simply seen a black woman in casual clothes and assumed she was servant staff. Everything that followed had been a consequence of that fundamental failure of character and judgment. Victoria Captain Hayes said formally, "You need to gather your personal belongings and leave this aircraft immediately. Security will escort you to the terminal, and HR will be in contact regarding the termination process." "Please," Victoria whispered one final time. "I can't lose this job. The promotion, my career, everything I've worked for." "Everything you worked for," Amara said quietly, "was built on the assumption that treating other people poorly was acceptable as long as they couldn't fight back. You didn't lose your career because of a mistake, Victoria. You lost it because you revealed who you really are when you thought no one important was watching." Elena Rodriguez's live stream had become a cultural phenomenon. The hashtag Victoria Sterling was trending worldwide, and social media was exploding with commentary about privilege, prejudice, and the consequences of treating people as less than human. But beyond the viral spectacle, something more important was happening. Amara Williams was using this moment to demonstrate that leadership wasn't about power over others. It was about protecting the dignity of everyone, regardless of their position or perceived status. Miguel Santos would remember this day for the rest of his career. Dr. Thompson would share the story in medical ethics seminars. Jessica Monroe would become an advocate for service industry workers' rights. Captain Hayes would retire knowing he'd witnessed a master class in leadership under pressure. And Victoria Sterling would spend years learning the hardest lesson of her life, that character revealed in moments of perceived power is character revealed forever. The revelation was complete, but the consequences were just beginning. The silence following Victoria's final plea stretched across the cabin like a wire pulled to breaking point. Through Elena Rodriguez's live stream, nearly 1 million viewers held their collective breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary confrontation would resolve. Amara Williams stood in the center of her aircraft, still wearing the Princeton hoodie that had triggered this entire sequence of events, and made a decision that would redefine how her company approached human dignity in the workplace. Victoria, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built Apex Aviation from a single charter plane into a billion-dollar enterprise. Your employment with this company is terminated immediately. You will be escorted from this aircraft by security, your access credentials will be revoked within the hour, and you will receive a formal termination letter outlining the reasons for your dismissal. Victoria's legs nearly gave out beneath her. 5 years of climbing the corporate ladder, months of planning for the promotion that would have changed her life, and decades of believing that her appearance and attitude entitled her to treat others poorly. All of it was disappearing in real time. "Dr. Williams," she whispered, "please? I'll do anything. Sensitivity training, anger management, community service. Whatever you think would help me learn from this." The offer of rehabilitation might have carried weight if it had come from genuine remorse rather than desperate self-preservation. But Amara had seen Victoria's true character revealed under pressure, and character wasn't something that could be fixed with a corporate training seminar. The time for learning was every day over the past 5 years. When you interacted with people you perceived as having less power than you, Amara replied. Today wasn't an aberration, Victoria. It was a revelation. Captain Hayes stepped forward, his professional demeanor masking decades of accumulated disgust for exactly this kind of behavior. "Victoria, I need your company badge, your security credentials, and any Apex Aviation property in your possession. You'll be escorted to the terminal where you can collect your personal belongings from your crew locker." With trembling hands, Victoria unpinned her wings from her uniform jacket, the symbol she'd worn with such pride just 30 minutes earlier. She handed over her badge, her security card, and the small company phone that had connected her to what she'd believed was her future. Miguel Santos watched this process with a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that Dr. Williams had taken decisive action to protect future passengers and employees from Victoria's prejudice. Sadness that a human being had chosen to build a career on cruelty and was now facing the inevitable consequences. Miguel Amara said, turning to the young man who had shown real courage under pressure, "I'd like to speak with you privately once we're airborne. Your willingness to intervene when you saw something wrong is exactly the kind of leadership this company needs to promote." Miguel felt his heart skip. In the span of 30 minutes, he'd gone from fearing for his job to receiving personal recognition from the CEO. More importantly, he'd learned that doing the right thing sometimes came with rewards beyond just being able to sleep at night. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was providing live commentary for her stream viewers, her voice barely containing her amazement at what she was witnessing. "This is absolutely unprecedented," Elena said into her camera. "I've covered luxury travel for 15 years, and I have never seen a more perfect example of instant karma. Dr. Williams has just demonstrated that true leadership means protecting people who can't protect themselves, even when, especially when, those people are your own employees." Jessica Monroe was frantically typing on her phone, updating her social media accounts with real-time commentary that was being shared and retweeted faster than she could refresh her notifications. Just witnessed the most incredible display of grace under pressure she posted to her 50,000 Instagram followers. CEO discovers employee discrimination in real time and handles it with absolute class. This is how you change company culture instantly. #leadership, #dignity, #apex. Aviation airport security arrived at that moment. 2 professional officers who had been called to escort Victoria from the aircraft. They moved with the efficient courtesy of people who had dealt with similar situations before, though never quite with this level of public scrutiny. "Ma'am," the lead security officer said to Victoria, "if you'll gather your personal belongings, we'll escort you to the terminal." Victoria looked around the cabin one final time, seeing the career she'd built crumbling around her like a house of cards in an earthquake. The other passengers were watching her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. Captain Hayes looked like he was suppressing the urge to personally throw her off the aircraft. Miguel Santos avoided her eyes entirely. And Dr. Amara Williams stood calmly in the center of it all, wearing a hoodie and yoga pants, having just demonstrated more executive presence and moral authority than Victoria had managed in 5 years of designer uniforms and practiced superiority. "I'm sorry," Victoria said to no one in particular as she walked toward the cabin door. "No, you're not," Jessica Monroe replied bluntly. "You're sorry you got caught. If Dr. Williams hadn't revealed her identity, you'd still be treating people like garbage and feeling proud of yourself for it." The truth of that observation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had no response because there was no response. Jessica was absolutely right. As Victoria descended the aircraft stairs between 2 security officers, Elena Rodriguez's camera captured every step. The woman who had entered the aircraft that morning radiating confidence and authority was leaving it looking broken and defeated, having learned the hardest possible lesson about the consequences of treating people as less than human. Within 4 hours of Victoria's termination, 3 things had happened that would turn a private moment of workplace justice into a public reckoning with discrimination in the luxury service industry. First, Elena Rodriguez's live stream had been viewed over 3 million times and shared across every major social media platform. The hashtags, #VictoriaSterling, #ApexAviation, and #CEO in disguise were trending globally, with commentary pouring in from celebrities, politicians, civil rights advocates, and ordinary people who had experienced similar discrimination. Second, major news outlets had picked up the story. CNN was running it as breaking news. The Washington Post had assigned their best investigative reporter to dig deeper into workplace culture at Apex Aviation, and Good Morning America had already reached out requesting an exclusive interview with Dr. Williams. Third, Victoria Sterling had hired an attorney, Gavin Matthews was exactly the kind of lawyer that people like Victoria turned to when their poor choices caught up with them. He specialized in wrongful termination suits, employment discrimination claims, and turning workplace conflicts into profitable media spectacles. His office in Manhattan was decorated with framed newspaper clippings documenting his most lucrative victories against deep-pocketed corporations. Victoria sat across from Gavin's mahogany desk, having spent the last 6 hours crafting a narrative that transformed her from perpetrator to victim. "Here's our strategy," Gavin explained, leaning back in his leather chair with the confidence of someone who had weaponized the legal system dozens of times before. "We file a wrongful termination suit claiming that you were fired for following company safety protocols. We argue that Dr. Williams boarded the aircraft without proper identification outside of normal boarding procedures, and that your response was appropriate given the security concerns." Victoria nodded eagerly. This was exactly what she wanted to hear, a way to reframe her prejudice as professionalism, her cruelty as conscientiousness. "But what about the video?" Victoria asked. "Everyone saw what happened." "Video can be misleading," Gavin replied smoothly. "Edited clips don't show the full context. We'll argue that you were following established procedures for dealing with unauthorized personnel on luxury aircraft. We'll paint Dr. Williams as an irresponsible CEO who created a dangerous situation by boarding without proper protocols. It was a strategy built on lies, but it was also one that might work in a legal system that often favored the party with the better narrative over the party with the truth. We'll also explore the possibility of a discrimination claim." Gavin continued. "Reverse discrimination. You're a white woman who was fired by a black CEO after following company procedures. In today's political climate, that story might resonate with certain audiences and pressure Apex into a settlement." Victoria felt a surge of hope for the first time since being escorted off the aircraft. Maybe this disaster could be turned into an opportunity. Maybe she could emerge from this mess not just employed but wealthy. "How much do we ask for?" Victoria inquired. $5 million, Gavin said without hesitation. $3 million for wrongful termination, $2 million for emotional distress and damage to your professional reputation. They'll settle for half that just to make the negative publicity go away. Neither Victoria nor Gavin realized that their conversation was about to run headlong into a CEO who had built her career on refusing to back down from bullies, whether they wore flight attendant uniforms or expensive suits. Dr. Amara Williams was 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean when her legal team called with news of Victoria's lawsuit. She listened to the details with the same calm attention she brought to merger negotiations and board meetings, taking notes on her tablet while London grew closer through the cabin windows. "So she's claiming she was fired for following safety protocols," Amara summarized after hearing the full complaint. "And her attorney thinks we'll settle to avoid negative publicity." That's the strategy, confirmed Sarah Chen, Apex Aviation's general counsel. "It's not uncommon. Companies often settle these cases because the legal costs and media attention can be more expensive than just paying to make the problem disappear." Sarah Amara said quietly, "Have you watched the video? I've watched it 17 times. It's the most clear-cut case of workplace discrimination I've ever seen documented in real time. Victoria doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. Then we don't settle, we fight. And we make sure that everyone understands the difference between legitimate employment disputes and opportunistic attempts to profit from getting caught being cruel to other human beings." Miguel Santos, who had been promoted to senior flight attendant for the remainder of the flight, overheard part of the conversation as he served Dr. Williams her afternoon coffee. "Dr. Williams," Miguel said quietly, "I want you to know that I support whatever decision you make. What Victoria did was wrong, and trying to profit from it makes it even worse." Amara smiled at the young man who was rapidly becoming a symbol of the kind of character she wanted to promote throughout her company. "Miguel, can you do me a favor? Call the corporate communications department and tell them to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I want to address this situation publicly before Victoria's narrative has time to take root. Of course. What should I tell them the focus will be? The truth, Amara replied. Sometimes that's the most radical position you can take. By the time Apex Aviation Flight 001 landed at London Heathrow, Amara had made several decisions that would turn Victoria's legal strategy into a master class in overreach. Instead of settling quietly, Apex would present the full unedited video of the entire interaction. Instead of issuing corporate statements through lawyers, Amara would speak directly to the media. And instead of treating this as a personnel matter to be handled privately, she would use it as an opportunity to establish new standards for dignity and respect throughout the aviation industry. Gavin Matthews had made the classic mistake of assuming that his opponent would play defense. He was about to discover that Dr. Amara Williams had built a billion-dollar company by playing offense, and she was very good at it. The battle for the narrative was about to begin, and Victoria Sterling had brought a knife to a gunfight. The Apex Aviation headquarters in White Plains, New York, had never hosted a press conference quite like the one that took place 48 hours after the Victoria Sterling incident. The main conference room was packed with reporters from major networks, print journalists, bloggers, and social media influencers, all drawn by a story that had captured the world's attention. Dr. Amara Williams stood at the podium wearing a navy blue business suit that commanded respect, but she'd made one deliberate choice that connected her to the moment that had started everything. She wore a small pin on her lapel shaped like a Princeton hoodie. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her one of the most respected executives in aviation. "I'm here today to address the incident that occurred aboard one of our aircraft this week, but more importantly to announce the changes that incident has inspired throughout Apex Aviation." The room was silent except for the click of cameras and the soft hum of recording equipment. "Let me be absolutely clear about what happened," Amara continued. "A senior member of our flight services team saw a black woman in casual clothing and immediately assumed she was cleaning staff. For 30 minutes, that employee treated me with a level of disrespect that revealed a fundamental failure not just of individual character, but of company culture." She gestured to a large screen behind her, which displayed the unedited video of her entire interaction with Victoria Sterling. This footage shows exactly what occurred with no editing, no selective presentation, and no spin. I want everyone to see precisely what happened, because truth is the foundation of meaningful change. The video played for the packed room, and even though most of the journalists had already seen clips online, watching the full interaction in its entirety was still shocking. Victoria's casual cruelty, her escalating demands, her physical aggression, and finally her complete breakdown when she realized who she'd been mistreating. It was a masterclass in how prejudice revealed itself when people thought they held power over others. The employee in question, Victoria Sterling, was terminated immediately, Amara said when the video concluded. But termination is not transformation. Firing one person doesn't change a culture that allowed that behavior to flourish. She clicked to the next slide, which outlined what would become known throughout the industry as the Dignity Protocol. Effective immediately, Apex Aviation is implementing the most comprehensive anti-discrimination and dignity training program in the transportation industry. Every employee from flight crews to ground staff to corporate executives will participate in monthly training sessions focused on recognizing and eliminating bias in all its forms. The protocol was revolutionary in its scope and specificity. Rather than generic sensitivity training, it included real-world scenarios, recorded examples of appropriate and inappropriate behavior, and, most importantly, a reporting system that protected employees who witnessed discrimination and chose to speak up. Miguel Santos, the junior flight attendant who intervened during this incident, demonstrated the kind of courage and character that we want to promote throughout our company. Amara continued. Effective today, Miguel is being promoted to Director of Cultural Excellence, a new position that will oversee the implementation of these protocols across our entire operation." In the audience, Miguel felt tears prick his eyes. In less than a week, he'd gone from fearing for his job to being personally promoted by the CEO to a position that didn't exist before his moment of moral courage. "We're also implementing what we call the open-door reality check," Amara explained. "Once per quarter, I will travel on our aircraft unannounced in casual clothing, observing how our employees treat passengers and each other when they don't know management is watching." The initiative was unprecedented in the luxury service industry. Most CEOs surrounded themselves with layers of protocol and advance notice. Amara was deliberately removing those barriers to ensure that the character she witnessed from Victoria wasn't hiding elsewhere in her company. Finally, she said, "We're launching the Respect Initiative, an industry-wide program that we're making available to any airline charter service or transportation company that wants to join us in establishing new standards for how employees at every level are expected to treat other human beings." The program included training materials, assessment tools, and ongoing support for companies that wanted to move beyond lip service to actual cultural change. It was Amara's way of ensuring that the lesson of Victoria Sterling's behavior would extend far beyond Apex Aviation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been given a front-row seat in recognition of her role in documenting the original incident, raised her hand during the question period. Dr. Williams, Victoria Sterling's attorney, has filed a wrongful termination lawsuit claiming she was following company safety protocols. How do you respond to that characterization? Amara's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture that suggested the question had touched on something she'd been waiting to address. "Let me be very clear about safety protocols," she said. At no point did Victoria Sterling ask to see identification. At no point did she verify my boarding credentials. At no point did she contact security about an actual safety concern. What she did was see a black woman in casual clothes and immediately assume I was service staff who needed to be ordered around. She paused, letting the distinction sink in. The idea that racism can be reframed as safety consciousness is not just legally absurd, it's morally offensive. We will not settle this lawsuit because Victoria's behavior was wrong. Her attorney's strategy is wrong, and the idea that discrimination can be made profitable through legal manipulation is something we will fight with every resource at our disposal. That evening in her penthouse office overlooking the Hudson River, Amara Williams sat alone with the Princeton hoodie draped over the back of her chair. It had become a symbol in the past week, of assumptions of prejudice, of the way people revealed their character when they thought they held power over others. But for Amara, it was also a reminder of her own journey from a young engineering student who had to prove herself every day to a CEO, who now had the power to protect others from the discrimination she'd experienced throughout her career. The hoodie had been with her during her sophomore year at Princeton, when a professor had questioned whether she belonged in the advanced physics program. It had been with her during her first job at a consulting firm where colleagues assumed she was an administrative assistant rather than an analyst with a degree from one of the world's top engineering schools. It had been with her when she'd started Apex Aviation with a single leased aircraft and a business plan that most investors dismissed as unrealistic for someone like her. The phrase had become familiar over the years. Someone like her was apparently not supposed to revolutionize industries or build billion-dollar companies. Now wearing that same hoodie had revealed that some of her own employees harbored the same prejudices that she'd been fighting her entire career. The discovery was painful, but it was also an opportunity. Miguel Santos knocked on her office door at exactly 7 p.m. as scheduled. He looked nervous but determined, wearing a new suit that he'd bought with his first paycheck as Director of Cultural Excellence. "Dr. Williams," he said, "I wanted to thank you again for this opportunity. But I also wanted to ask you something that's been bothering me since the incident. Please sit down. And call me Amara when it's just us." "What's on your mind?" Miguel settled into the chair across from her desk, gathering his thoughts. How many other Victorias are there in the company? People who treat others badly when they think no one important is watching. And how do we find them before they damage more people? It was exactly the right question, and it confirmed Amara's instinct that Miguel had the kind of moral intelligence that couldn't be taught in business school. That's why the Dignity Protocol includes anonymous reporting and regular unannounced observations, Amara explained. We can't change people who don't want to be changed, but we can create an environment where their behavior has immediate consequences. What about the lawsuit? Miguel asked. Doesn't it bother you that Victoria is trying to profit from what she did? Amara smiled, and Miguel caught a glimpse of the steel that had built Apex Aviation from nothing. Miguel, I've been underestimated my entire career. People have tried to minimize my achievements, question my qualifications, and profit from betting against me. Victoria Sterling and her attorney are just the latest in a long line of people who mistook my commitment to dignity for weakness. She gestured toward the city lights visible through her office windows. This company exists because I refuse to accept other people's limitations on what I could accomplish. The Dignity Protocol exists because I refuse to accept other people's limitations on how human beings should be treated. Victoria chose to be cruel when she thought she had power. Now she's going to learn what happens when she tries to be cruel to someone who actually has it. 6 months later, the transformation at Apex Aviation had become a case study taught in business schools around the world. The Dignity Protocol had been adopted by 47 airlines, 12 hotel chains, and countless other service companies. Miguel Santos had been featured on the cover of Fast Company magazine as one of the 40 under 40 leaders transforming corporate culture. And Victoria Sterling was working as a customer service representative at a call center in Queens, making $12 an hour and discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of the kind of treatment she'd once dished out to others. The lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice, meaning Victoria couldn't refile on the same claims. The judge had noted in her ruling that attempting to reframe discrimination as safety protocol represents a fundamental misunderstanding of both employment law and basic human decency. Gavin Matthews had been sanctioned by the New York State Bar for filing a frivolous lawsuit, and his practice had lost several major clients who didn't want to be associated with his reputation for weaponizing the legal system on behalf of people who had been caught behaving badly. But the most meaningful change wasn't measured in lawsuits defeated or protocols implemented. It was measured in the hundreds of employees who now felt safe to speak up when they witnessed discrimination, knowing that their company would support them rather than punish them for rocking the boat. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had parlayed her documentation of the original incident into a documentary about discrimination in the travel industry. The film, titled Dignity at 30,000 Feet, had won awards at Sundance and Cannes and had sparked conversations about respect and humanity in workplaces around the world. Jessica Monroe had become an unlikely advocate for service industry workers' rights, using her social media platform to highlight examples of both exceptional service and discriminatory treatment. She'd learned that being a witness to injustice came with the responsibility to speak up even when it was uncomfortable. Captain Robert Hayes had decided to delay his retirement in order to help train the next generation of pilots in the principles of the Dignity Protocol. At his age, he'd seen enough discrimination to fill several careers, and he wanted to be part of creating an industry where it no longer flourished in darkness. On the anniversary of the Victoria Sterling incident, Amara Williams received a handwritten letter that she would keep framed in her office for the rest of her career. Dr. Williams. The letter began, "You don't know me, but I'm a housekeeper at the Marriott in Chicago. Last week, a guest treated me the way that flight attendant treated you, like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was less than human because of my job and the color of my skin. But another guest saw what happened and she spoke up. She said she'd watched your video and learned that standing silent when someone is being mistreated makes you part of the problem. She reported the incident to management, and the guest who was cruel to me was asked to leave the hotel. I wanted you to know that your courage to speak up has given other people courage to speak up too. You've made the world a little bit safer for people like me who just want to do our jobs with dignity. Thank you for showing us that how we treat each other matters, no matter who is watching." The letter was signed simply Maria, but it represented thousands of similar stories from service industry workers who had found their voices because Amara Williams had used hers. The Princeton hoodie still hung in Amara's office, no longer a symbol of assumptions and prejudice, but a reminder that character revealed under pressure is character revealed forever. And that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is treat every human being like they matter, regardless of what they're wearing or where society says they belong. Victoria Sterling had learned too late that cruelty has consequences, but Amara Williams had proven that kindness has power, and that true leadership means using that power to protect people who can't protect themselves. The transformation was complete, but the legacy was just beginning. Exactly 1 year after the Victoria Sterling incident, Dr. Amara Williams made a decision that would bring her journey full circle. She boarded Apex Aviation Flight 447 to Los Angeles wearing the same Princeton hoodie, the same yoga pants, and the same quiet confidence that had exposed so much about her company culture 12 months earlier. But this time, everything was different. "Good morning and welcome aboard," said Marcus Rivera, the lead flight attendant who had been promoted to Victoria's former position after completing the Dignity Protocol training with distinction. "May I see your boarding pass?" Marcus checked Amara's credentials professionally efficiently and without a trace of the assumptions that had destroyed his predecessor's career. He didn't see a black woman in casual clothes who needed to be judged and categorized. He saw a passenger who deserved the same respect and service as anyone else who stepped aboard the aircraft. Dr. Williams Marcus said warmly after confirming her identity, "Welcome back to Apex Aviation. Is there anything I can get you before we begin boarding the other passengers?" The contrast with Victoria's treatment couldn't have been more stark. Here was an employee who understood that respect wasn't determined by appearance, that dignity wasn't contingent on designer clothing, and that every human being who entered his workspace deserved to be treated as exactly that, a human being. "Just some sparkling water when you have a chance," Amara replied. "And Marcus, thank you for setting exactly the right tone." Miguel Santos, now Director of Cultural Excellence, had arranged to be on this anniversary flight to observe how the Dignity Protocol was functioning in practice. He watched the interaction between Marcus and Dr. Williams with the pride of someone who had helped build something meaningful from the ashes of someone else's cruelty. "The transformation has been remarkable," Miguel told Elena Rodriguez, who was documenting the anniversary flight for a follow-up article. "We've gone from a culture where discrimination could hide behind authority to one where respect is the foundation of everything we do." The passenger manifest for this flight told its own story of change. Along with Dr. Williams, the aircraft carried Maria Santos, no relation to Miguel the housekeeper from Chicago, who had written the letter that now hung framed in Amara's office. Maria was flying to Los Angeles to accept an award from the Service Industry Workers Advocacy Group, an organization that had grown out of the conversation sparked by the Victoria Sterling video. Also aboard was Dr. James Patterson, a sociologist who had written extensively about workplace discrimination, and Sarah Kim, a documentary filmmaker who was creating a follow-up to Elena's award-winning film about dignity in the travel industry. Each passenger represented a different facet of the changes that had rippled outward from that single moment of revealed character. Together, they formed a living testament to the idea that individual actions, when witnessed and documented, could create waves of transformation that extended far beyond their original scope. Captain Hayes, who had decided to delay his retirement for another 2 years to help train the next generation of pilots in the principles of ethical leadership, made his usual pre-flight announcement with a small addition that had become standard on Apex Aviation flights. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Apex Aviation. We are committed to providing not just excellent service, but service delivered with dignity and respect for every individual who flies with us. Our crew has been trained to see every passenger as a valued human being deserving of courtesy regardless of their appearance, background, or circumstances. The announcement, which would have seemed unnecessary or even patronizing on most airlines, had become a source of pride for Apex employees and reassurance for passengers who had experienced discrimination elsewhere. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude over the American heartland, Amara found herself reflecting on the lessons that had emerged from what started as a simple case of mistaken identity and evolved into a movement for dignity in the workplace. The first lesson was about power and how people chose to wield it. Victoria Sterling had believed that her authority as senior flight attendant gave her the right to treat people poorly, especially people she perceived as powerless. But true power, Amara had learned, was the ability to lift others up, not tear them down. The second lesson was about the danger of assumptions. Victoria had seen a black woman in casual clothes and immediately categorized her as service staff who needed to be ordered around. Those assumptions had cost her everything, but they had also revealed a truth that extended far beyond one flight attendant's prejudice. How we treat people when we think they can't fight back reveals who we really are when all pretense is stripped away. The third lesson was about the importance of witnesses. Miguel Santos could have remained silent when he saw Victoria's behavior escalating. Helena Rodriguez could have chosen not to document what she was seeing. Jessica Monroe could have minded her own business and avoided getting involved. But each of them had chosen to bear witness, and their collective decision to speak up had transformed a private moment of discrimination into a public reckoning with systemic prejudice. The fourth lesson was about the ripple effects of moral courage. Amara's decision not to immediately reveal her identity, but instead to experience the full extent of Victoria's behavior, had created a teaching moment that extended far beyond Apex Aviation. The Dignity Protocol had been adopted by companies around the world. The documentary had sparked conversations in boardrooms and break rooms alike. The story had become a reminder that treating people with respect wasn't just morally right. It was good business. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the possibility of redemption through change. Victoria Sterling had lost her career because she had chosen cruelty over kindness, but her downfall had created opportunities for people like Miguel Santos to rise, for companies like Apex Aviation to transform, and for an entire industry to examine its own practices and find them wanting. Maria Santos, the housekeeper whose letter had so moved. Amara stood up during the flight to address the other passengers. An impromptu moment that Marcus Rivera facilitated with grace and professionalism. I want to thank Dr. Williams and everyone at Apex Aviation for showing the world that how we treat each other matters, Maria said, her voice steady despite her nerves. I clean hotel rooms for a living, and for years I was invisible to most guests. But after the Victoria Sterling video went viral, something changed. People started seeing me, acknowledging me, treating me like I mattered. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My daughter is studying to be a nurse, and she told me something last week that I'll never forget. She said, Mom, Dr. Williams didn't just change her company, she changed how people think about respect. And that's true. Because of what happened on this airline, my daughter is entering a profession where she believes she'll be treated with dignity, no matter what she looks like or where she comes from. The spontaneous applause that followed Maria's words wasn't performed for cameras or social media. It was the genuine response of people who understood that they had been part of something larger than a single flight, larger than a single company, larger than a single industry. As the person behind this channel, let me share what this story has taught me about human nature, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The most striking thing about Victoria Sterling's behavior wasn't its cruelty. Sadly, workplace discrimination is more common than we'd like to admit. What was remarkable was how completely she revealed her character when she thought no one important was watching. She didn't just treat Dr. Williams poorly. She treated her with a level of contempt that exposed a fundamental belief that some people were worth less than others based on their appearance and perceived social status. But Victoria's downfall wasn't just about karma catching up with a bully. It was about the power of witnesses to transform private injustice into public accountability. Miguel Santos chose to speak up despite risking his job. Elena Rodriguez chose to document what she saw despite not knowing how it would end. Jessica Monroe chose to confront the obvious prejudice despite it being none of her business. Each of them played a role in ensuring that Victoria's behavior had consequences. The lesson I take from this is that we all have a choice when we witness discrimination or cruelty. We can remain silent and preserve our comfort, or we can speak up and risk the discomfort that comes with confronting injustice. The people in this story who chose to speak up didn't do so because they were guaranteed a good outcome. They did it because staying silent would have made them complicit in someone else's humiliation. Dr. Williams could have revealed her identity immediately and ended the confrontation before it began. Instead, she chose to endure 30 minutes of discrimination because she understood that sometimes you have to let people reveal who they really are before you can address the systemic problems that allow such behavior to flourish. Her patience in that moment, her willingness to absorb cruelty in service of a larger lesson, was a masterclass in leadership. But perhaps the most important lesson is about the possibility of change. The story didn't end with Victoria's termination or even with her failed lawsuit. It ended with transformation of a company culture, of an industry's practices, and of countless individuals who were inspired to treat others with greater dignity and respect. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, dismissed because of your background, or treated poorly by someone who thought they had power over you, I want you to know that your experience matters. Your dignity matters. And sometimes standing up for yourself or speaking up for others can create changes that extend far beyond the immediate moment. Share your own stories in the comments. Have you witnessed discrimination that you wish you'd confronted? Have you been treated poorly by someone in a service position? Have you seen examples of people using their authority to lift others up rather than tear them down? Your experiences help others feel less alone and more empowered to act when they face similar situations. Remember, the person in the hoodie might own the company, but even if they don't, they deserve to be treated with respect. Because at the end of the day, how we treat people when we think no one important is watching reveals everything about who we are when all the pretense is stripped away. Subscribe if you believe in justice, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right. Hit that notification bell because the next story might feature someone you know, maybe even you. And remember, character revealed under pressure is character revealed forever. Make sure yours reveals something you can be proud of.